The EU and Iran are putting on a united front today in support of the landmark 2015 nuclear deal. There's talks in Brussels today with the Iranian foreign minister come as Washington's thinking about imposing new sanctions on Tehran with a deadline coming up on Friday. The EU and foreign ministers from Britain, Germany and France have united to defend the accord that's curbed Iran's nuclear ambitions in return for the relaxing of punishing sanctions, but that Donald Trump has repeatedly criticized and threatened to leave. Here's more from EU Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini.
The deal is working. It is delivering on its main goal, which means keeping the Iranian nuclear program in check and under close surveillance. The IAEA has confirmed in 9 reports that Iran is fully complying with the commitments made under the agreement.
For more on this, let's go live to London with Iran specialist Ellie Geranmayeh. Thank you so much for joining us. We just heard Federica Mogherini there saying that deal is working. Will that be enough to convince Donald Trump to endorse it?
Well, that's $1 million question that's coming up very shortly. What the Europeans are trying to do is to show great political willingness to remain committed to this deal so long as Iran is abiding by its nuclear commitments. Now, I think the Europeans seem to be getting mixed messages at times from the White House and the State Department as to where President Trump is going to land on this issue, and there is still uncertainty about what President Trump will do.
Well, I guess the question is, might the Trump administration keep some of the sanctions in place but remove some of the others? And if so, who might be targeted?
Well, you can't have a half-baked fulfillment of your obligations under this deal. The deal has, pages and pages intricately outlining what each side is meant to do. Now, if the U.S. president decides to waive the sanctions as required under the deal, but then reintroduce sanctions on some of the entities who had been given relief under this deal, there's going to be a lot of question marks in Tehran about whether that is actually fulfillment of the U.S. obligations. But, for example, if, as before, the U.S. decides to sanction new entities for issues like the missiles program or human rights issues, then that's, I think, an area where certainly the Europeans would sit much more comfortably that the U.S. is still committed to this deal.
Ellie, what kind of effect might the recent protests in Iran have on Donald Trump's decision? Might he use that as leverage?
Well, there's certainly concern that he would try and link the protests, which are a domestic issue, they raise human rights concerns for sure, that he would try and link that issue to the nuclear deal. Now, what the Europeans did very clearly today in a united fashion is say, although we are very concerned with the developments recently taking place in Iran, we see that as a separate issue to the nuclear deal, and it remains unlinked in their opinion. And that is the opinion of Russia and China as well. Now, there has been talk in policy circles in Washington, particularly those that have been consistently opposed to this nuclear agreement, that the president should now use this as leverage or a platform to say that the United States does not want to remain in a deal with a country like Iran. But the other parties to this deal clearly disagree with that position.
Ellie, the international community knows very well that Donald Trump's a bit of a wild card. This could go either way. Are the EU and Iran preparing any kind of contingency plan, a plan B, if the Trump administration does not waive the previous sanctions Friday?
I think there's certainly been some wise discussions about a contingency plan, and this isn't, this probably was accelerated in October when the U.S. president decided to decertify the nuclear deal in terms of the relationship between the executive power and the U.S. Congress. And I think since then that was a wake-up call for the rest of the parties to this deal, that the president may certainly continue to backtrack from the agreement and to start having some proactive measures in place should he actually serve a death blow to the deal or continue to hollow out the nuclear agreement through continual unpredictability. Now, we've already seen more proactive measures being taken, at least from the European side, to try and make sure the deal's implementation hiccups are addressed on both sides. And I think part of the discussions, if I were to guess about today, would be about where each party would place themselves and how to handle potential backtracking from the U.S. president on this deal.
Ellie, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. That's Ellie Geranmayeh, an Iran specialist, speaking to us there live from London. Thank you.